The grand ballroom of Buckingham Palace shimmered with golden light from the crystal chandeliers above. Hundreds of distinguished guests filled the space, their conversations creating a gentle hum that echoed off the ornate walls. The annual state dinner was always a magnificent affair, but tonight felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a sense of anticipation that nobody could quite explain. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood near the entrance, her emerald green gown flowing gracefully around her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for what was about to unfold. In her hands, she held a small velvet box that seemed to carry the weight of history itself. Inside lay Princess Diana's famous sapphire and diamond necklace, a piece that had not been seen in public since that tragic night in Paris so many years ago. The decision to wear Diana's necklace had not been made lightly. For weeks, Catherine had wrestled with the choice. The palace advisors had been divided. Some saw it as a beautiful tribute to William's mother, while others worried about the memories it might stir. But Catherine knew in her heart what she needed to do. This was about more than jewelry. It was about honoring a legacy and showing the world that Diana's spirit still lived on in the royal family. As she opened the velvet box, the sapphires caught the light, sparkling like fragments of the night sky. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the necklace from its cushioned home. The room seemed to sense that something momentous was happening. Conversations began to fade and had started to turn toward where Catherine stood. King Charles was engaged in conversation with the French ambassador when he noticed the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere. Following the gazes of those around him, his eyes found Catherine. The moment he saw what she held in her hands, his entire demeanor changed. The easy smile that had graced his face vanished, replaced by an expression that nobody in the room could quite read. William, standing across the room, watched his wife with a mixture of pride and concern. He knew how much courage this moment required. They had discussed it endlessly in private, the significance of the necklace, what it represented, and what wearing it would mean. He gave her a subtle nod of encouragement, his blue eyes conveying all the support she needed. As Catherine's fingers worked to clasp the necklace around her neck, a collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. The sapphires settled against her skin, and suddenly, it was as if Diana herself had entered the room. The resemblance was uncanny, not just in the jewelry, but in the grace and dignity with which Catherine wore it. Charles remained frozen in place, his champagne glass held midway to his lips. Memories flooded back with overwhelming force. He remembered the day he had given that necklace to Diana, how her eyes had lit up when she first saw it. He remembered the state dinners where she had worn it, commanding the attention of everyone in the room with her natural charisma and warmth. The French ambassador continued speaking, but Charles heard nothing. His mind was transported to another time, another life. He saw Diana descending the staircase at Kensington Palace, the necklace glittering against her pale skin. He remembered their private moments, both tender and tumultuous, that had played out behind palace walls. Camilla, now queen consort, noticed her husband's sudden stillness. She had been chatting with the Spanish royal couple when she felt the change in the room's energy. Following Charles's gaze, she saw Catherine adjusting the necklace, the sapphires catching the light with every movement. Camilla's expression remained carefully neutral, but those who knew her well could see the slight tightening around her eyes. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. 400 of Britain's most powerful and influential people stood frozen, watching this moment unfold. Some of the older guests remembered Diana wearing that very necklace at similar events. They remembered her laughter, her compassion, and the way she had changed the monarchy forever. Catherine, fully aware of the attention focused on her, maintained her composure with remarkable grace. She had prepared for this moment, knowing that wearing Diana's necklace would make a statement that reverberated far beyond the palace walls. But she hadn't quite prepared for the intensity of the reaction, particularly from Charles. Slowly, very slowly, Charles set down his champagne glass on a nearby table. The soft clink of crystal on marble seemed to echo through the silent room. He straightened his shoulders, adjusted his medals, and began walking toward Catherine. Each step was measured, deliberate, as hundreds of eyes followed his movement. William instinctively moved closer to his wife, ready to intervene if necessary. He knew the complicated relationship his father had with his mother's memory. Despite the years that had passed, Diana's presence still loomed large in their family dynamics. The decision to wear the necklace had been Catherine's, but William had supported it, believing it was time to reclaim his mother's jewelry as a celebration of her life rather than a reminder of her death. As Charles approached, Catherine lifted her chin slightly, meeting his gaze with quiet confidence. She had come to love and respect her father-in-law over the years, but she also knew that this moment transcended their personal relationship. This was about the past, present, and future of the monarchy all colliding in a single instant. The distance between Charles and Catherine seemed to stretch infinitely, though it was merely a few dozen steps across the polished marble floor. With each step Charles took, the crowd parted like the Red Sea, creating a clear path between the king and the Princess of Wales. The orchestra, which had been playing soft classical music, gradually faded to silence, the conductor sensing the gravity of the moment. Charles's face remained unreadable, a mask of royal composure that he had perfected over decades of public life. But those who knew him well could see the storm of emotions brewing beneath the surface. His jaw was set, his hands clasped behind his back in that characteristic pose he adopted when processing difficult feelings. Catherine stood her ground, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the central sapphire of the necklace. The stone was cool against her fingers, a tangible connection to the woman who had worn it before her. She thought of Diana, of the stories William had shared about his mother, of the legacy of compassion and service she had left behind. Among the crowd, reactions varied dramatically. Some of the younger guests, those who had only known Diana through photographs and documentaries, watched with fascination as history seemed to unfold before their eyes. They whispered to each other, already imagining how this moment would be reported in tomorrow's newspapers. The older generation, particularly those who had been friends with Diana, felt a complex mix of emotions. Lady Sarah McCorquodale, Diana's sister, stood near a pillar, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She remembered helping Diana choose jewelry for state occasions, remembered the joy her sister had found in beautiful things despite the sadness that often surrounded her. Former Prime Minister John Major, who had known both Charles and Diana during some of their most difficult years, watched with the wisdom of someone who had seen too much royal drama. He understood the delicate balance the monarchy constantly maintained between tradition and progress, between honoring the past and embracing the future. As Charles finally reached Catherine, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. He stood before her, his height requiring her to look up to meet his eyes. For a long moment, they simply regarded each other, a lifetime of unspoken words passing between them. Then, in a move that nobody had anticipated, Charles's stern expression began to soften. The corners of his eyes crinkled slightly, and the ghost of a smile played at his lips. His hand moved from behind his back, reaching out slowly toward Catherine. "May I?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying despite its softness in the hushed room. Catherine nodded, understanding intuitively what he was asking. Charles gently touched the necklace, his fingers barely grazing the sapphires. His touch was reverent, almost prayer-like, as if he were greeting an old friend after a long absence. "She would have been so proud," Charles said, his voice thick with emotion. "So very proud of the woman you've become, of the mother you are to her grandchildren." The words hit Catherine with unexpected force. She had prepared for resistance, for awkwardness, even for anger. But this gentle acceptance, this acknowledgement of her place in Diana's legacy, caught her completely off guard. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The transformation in Charles's demeanor sent ripples of shock through the assembled guests. Those who had expected confrontation or cold disapproval found themselves witnessing something far more powerful, a moment of genuine healing and acceptance. "Your Majesty," Catherine began, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment. "I wear this not to replace her, but to honor her. to show George, Charlotte, and Louis that their grandmother's light continues to shine through our family. Charles nodded slowly, his hand still resting near the necklace. I know, he said simply, and I think it's time. Time for these beautiful pieces to see the light again, to bring joy instead of sorrow. The crowd began to murmur, a soft susurrus of surprise and approval spreading through the ballroom. This was not the reaction anyone had expected from the king. For years, Diana's jewelry had been kept locked away, too painful a reminder of a troubled past. But here was Charles, publicly blessing Catherine's choice to bring these treasures back into the light. William moved to stand beside his wife, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. Charles looked at his son, and in that glance, years of unspoken pain and reconciliation passed between them. The ghost of Diana had always stood between them, a barrier built of guilt, grief, and things left unsaid. But in this moment, with Catherine wearing Diana's necklace with such grace and dignity, it felt as if that ghost was finally being laid to rest. William, Charles said, turning to address his son directly, your mother had exquisite taste. She chose each piece of jewelry with such care, always thinking about the message it would send, the people it would inspire. He paused, his voice growing stronger. Catherine wears this necklace with the same thoughtfulness, the same dedication to duty and service. The formal atmosphere of the state dinner began to shift. What had started as a moment of tension was transforming into something else entirely. A public reconciliation, a passing of the torch, an acknowledgement that the monarchy could honor its past while embracing its future. Queen Camilla stepped forward, having made her way through the crowd to join her husband. Her approach caused another rustle of anticipation. The relationship between Camilla and Diana's memory had always been complicated, fraught with the weight of history and public opinion. But Camilla, with the wisdom and grace she had cultivated over her years as Charles's wife, did something that stunned even the most cynical observers. She reached out and took Catherine's hand, examining the necklace with genuine admiration. It suits you perfectly, Camilla said warmly. Diana always knew how to choose pieces that would transcend time. This necklace looks as if it were made for you, Catherine. The generosity of the gesture was not lost on anyone in the room. Here was Camilla, who had lived for decades in Diana's shadow, publicly embracing Catherine's decision to wear her predecessor's jewelry. It was a moment of such unexpected grace that several guests found themselves dabbing at their eyes. The evening that had begun with such tension now flowed with an entirely different energy. The orchestra, taking its cue from the shifted mood, began to play again, a gentle waltz that seemed to capture the bittersweet beauty of the moment. Conversations resumed throughout the ballroom, but they were different now, filled with a sense of having witnessed something historic. Catherine stood at the center of it all, the sapphire necklace catching the light with every movement, every breath. She felt the weight of it not just physically, but emotionally and symbolically. This wasn't just jewelry. It was a bridge between past and present, a tangible link in the chain that connected Diana to her sons and grandchildren. Throughout the rest of the evening, guests approached Catherine with stories about Diana, memories of times when she had worn that very necklace. Rather than being painful, these recollections felt like gifts, pieces of a mosaic that helped complete the picture of the woman William had loved and lost too soon. An elderly duchess recounted a charity gala where Diana had auctioned off a dance to raise money for children's hospitals. She wore that necklace, the duchess said, her aged eyes bright with memory. And she laughed so beautifully when a shy young man bid his entire month's salary just to dance with her. She made sure he got his dance, and then she quietly arranged for the money to be returned to him. A former ambassador shared how Diana had worn the necklace to a diplomatic reception during a particularly tense period in international relations. She had this way of diffusing tension, he recalled. One comment about how heavy the necklace was, how it was giving her a neck ache, and suddenly all these world leaders were laughing and relaxing. She knew exactly what she was doing. Each story added another layer to Catherine's understanding of the woman whose jewelry she now wore. She began to see the necklace not just as a beautiful object, but as a witness to countless moments of compassion, humor, and humanity. Charles circulated through the room, and observers noted a lightness to his bearing that hadn't been seen in years. Several times throughout the evening, his eyes would find Catherine across the room, and each time, he would nod approvingly. It was as if in accepting Catherine's choice to wear Diana's necklace, he had finally made peace with a part of his past that had haunted him for decades. William remained close to Catherine throughout the evening, his pride evident to all who saw them. He shared quiet moments with guests who had known his mother, accepting their condolences and memories with grace. But, more importantly, he watched as his wife carried forward his mother's legacy in her own unique way. "She would have loved you," he whispered to Catherine during a brief moment alone. "Not just because you're wearing her necklace, but because of how you're wearing it. With strength, with purpose, with love." Catherine leaned into her husband, feeling the truth of his words. She had never met Diana, but through William's stories, through the work she did with charities Diana had supported, through the very jewelry she now wore, she felt a connection to her mother-in-law that transcended death. As the evening drew to a close, Catherine stood with Charles and William on the palace balcony, looking out over the lights of London. The sapphire necklace caught the moonlight, seeming to glow with an inner light. "You know," Charles said quietly, "I gave her that necklace for our 5th wedding anniversary. She wore it to everything after that, state dinners, charity galas, even to the theater. She said it made her feel like she belonged." Catherine touched the necklace gently. "It still does that," she said softly. "It makes me feel like I'm part of something bigger, something that started long before me and will continue long after." Charles smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Then, it's serving its purpose perfectly. As they stood there, 3 generations of the royal family united in a moment of unexpected harmony. The palace staff below were already spreading the word about what had transpired. By morning, the world would know about the night Catherine wore Diana's necklace, and how Charles's reaction had stunned everyone. Not with anger or sadness, but with acceptance, love, and a grace that honored the past while embracing the future. The sapphire necklace, which had once symbolized a fairy tale that ended in tragedy, had become something new. In Catherine's hands, around Catherine's neck, it represented continuity, healing, and the enduring power of love to transcend even the deepest wounds. Diana's legacy lived on, not as a ghost that haunted the palace halls, but as a light that continued to guide the family she had loved so fiercely. As the evening ended and the guests departed, each carrying their own version of the story they had witnessed, Catherine carefully removed the necklace. She placed it back in its velvet box with the same reverence with which she had taken it out. But everyone knew this wouldn't be the last time Diana's jewelry would grace a royal occasion. The palace had finally found a way to honor its past while stepping confidently into its future, and it had all started with a simple reach for a necklace and a reaction that nobody had seen coming.